Hey guys, it's Mel. Today I want to dig more into INTJs and emotions, and specifically focus on the emotion of anger. So I did a video about INTJs and kind of the process that we use when we deal with emotion, which basically involves squirreling them all the way into a box and saving them to deal with later. Anger specifically is one of those emotions that really gets repressed. And I just want to note that you kind of disregard in this conversation the everyday irritation. Some people view INTJs as basically always being angry and irritable. And the way that we deal with that may or may not be perceived as healthy is generally through sarcasm and faces. You know, when I look at you like, you really just said that? Or say something completely snarky and sarcastic, which to me is also just completely humorous because sometimes people don't realize I'm being mean. But anyway, I'm talking more about real anger. And that is something that specifically we want to repress and control, because anger most of the time looks like something that is outrage and out of control, and INTJs don't like making decisions based on their emotions. They don't like being persuaded by any kind of emotional involvement. We don't want to be viewed as being controlled by emotions or led by them in any way. And anger is basically one of those things that has more outside influences. An INTJ is going to have a propensity towards repressing emotions, but anger specifically is pretty much a society and cultural thing that anger's bad, that we don't punch holes in walls. We don't scream at people at the grocery store. Like, that's unacceptable. So there's additional influences that push an INTJ to repress anger specifically. Now, when it comes to personality typing, just different kinds of typology frameworks and things like that, if you look at a crossover with the Enneagram is split up into 9 different personality types and 3 different triads that the 9 types are broken up into. Typically, INTJs, like the most, are going to be number 1s or number 5s on the Enneagram. Now, a number 5 falls into the fear triad, and they're more logic focused. And a number 1 on the Enneagram falls into the anger triad, coincidentally enough, and they're more focused on perfectionism. And me personally, I type as a number 1, and so I identify even more with the anger thing. And part of that is also with my family of origin and stuff from my background. So there's a lot of like outside influence that focused on anger. And, you know, the number 1 Enneagram anger thing to me is kind of like the opposite side of a coin. When you're seeking constant perfection and completion of things, and you're the righteous one doing everything the right way, or at least that's the way that you're viewing it going through life, you kind of carry around a lot of righteous anger, kind of an indignation that you have expectations of everybody else and they're not succumbing to them. And so this is, you know, that outlet is anger. There's scripture, and it's repeated in many other places, that love keeps no records of wrongs. And for me, I think you could also put on the other side of that resentment basically catalogs every minute detail of anything anybody does that could potentially even be construed as a wrongdoing. And that's where the real problem comes in with anger. When you take anger and instead of dealing with it and releasing it immediately, we repress it and it turns into resentment. And eventually all of the resentment builds and explodes in rage. And while resentment builds, it's basically like stockpiling the ammunition on the little spreadsheet in my mind of all the things that you did wrong or this thing does wrong or whatever, of building all that ammunition. And if you make it to the hot rage point, that's open season, open fire, unloading all the ammunition onto anything. And INTJs are known for kind of being icy hot and severing ties to things that we don't like. So if we come to a person, we butt heads with them and we decide that they're incompetent, we stamp that label onto them, we just sever ties and walk away. And it's the same thing with things in processes. Like if it's inefficient, it's incomplete, like forget about it, move on, scrap it, do something new. We say goodbye. And that's what you want to avoid, getting to that point, because there's things that you can lose by jumping to those kind of conclusions, and you can work through the anger instead. So what makes an INTJ angry? I just want to run through a couple of things that kind of lead to that, the types of things that, build into rage. And I found a good list on psychologyjunkie.com, so I'm going to use their list. I was like, yeah, they did a pretty good job. So things that make an INTJ potentially enraged. Unexpected interruptions or surprises. Yeah, don't surprise me. Not having enough alone time. This is something that really can build over time. Narrow-minded assumptions. Being micromanaged or controlled. And even if they're not, them feeling that way can lead to that same place. Incompetence, ignorance, laziness, inefficiency. All of these things we hate in other people, in processes, in things. And also on the flip side, if somebody accuses us of it, that can enrage us. If you imply in any way that you think that I'm incompetent, forget about it. Emotion-based decision making. We don't want to do it. We don't want to watch other people do it either. We think it's stupid. Having our advice or insight dismissed or ignored. Again, that kind of makes us feel like we're incompetent or inefficient or we're not worth your time. Being pushed into social situations that we're not ready for. We don't want to do it. We need to emotionally prepare for things like that. And if you just drag us, like, surprise, I think like a way to like hit almost all of these things would be like a friend planning a surprise party that they drag you into and like 150 people are there or whatever. Like that would just be like mind blown, right? But these are some of the things that can kind of like tick off the INTJ, and sometimes they're immediate, but a lot of it's just building, if multiple things happen or over time they repeatedly happen, like the micromanagement or controlling, like being in a relationship where somebody's controlling or you're working for a boss who's micromanaging you. If this goes on for years, that can become like a serious problem that they have to get out of before the enraged, like icy hot, like burns so hot it turns blue, kind of hellfire rains down with the anger explosion. So how can we as INTJs deal with anger in a healthy way? I put together kind of a list. So yeah, 3-step process, which nothing is ever that easy, but let's try to simplify it. I'm trying to be organized. So number 1, you want to acknowledge it. For me personally, I've realized that I have a really hard time doing this. I've spent most of my life thinking I'm not angry. I never have been like physically violent. And again, part of that is like the repression, all the things, but outside influences. My family of origin is extremely passive. And I grew up that way. Violence solves nothing. You never hit anybody, all these things. I've only gotten like physically aggressive with my siblings when I was very small. And even beyond that, I'm like, I don't know. I've always thought to myself, like part of that I think is also science and hormones. And if I were male, I probably would be way more likely to like punch things or people when I get angry. But I don't know. I don't have any way to prove that. So you guys can shout out in the comments other INTJs, especially male ones, if you do if you do see that kind of aggression. But me, it's basically just words. And you know, usually it feels like I've resolved it. I throw back a little sarcasm because you've angered me and I fixed that. But sometimes it just stews a lot longer. So you have to acknowledge it. And for me, like I said, that's been difficult to do. I don't always identify my own emotions myself. I'm learning to do that as a grown-up. I have in the past had family members and friends be like, oh, you're upset, like, do you want to talk about it, like, do I need to leave you alone? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not upset. Which obviously I am. I just haven't realized it yet. It hasn't sunk in. But for me, the biggest point in my life of where I've now have reconciled this and started studying personality types and realizing, you know, things that contribute and changing around from my family of origin, is I went to therapy for the first time. And the therapist gave me homework, which I was like, this is great, because I'm not just, you know, I was worried. I'm like, I'm going to spend a bunch of money and this isn't going to help me. But yeah, here's a worksheet. Like, I want you to do this and this and this before we meet again. I'm like, yes, like this I can do. Like, I actively am changing something. I'm getting better. And so the worksheet that I had, yeah, the overachieving perfectionist that I am, I looked up like the little margin had information about where the worksheet had copied from one of these psychology workbooks. And I was like, I'm gonna find this book. And sure enough, I did on eBay, and I ordered a copy of it. And I was like, I'm not gonna do just this worksheet. Like, I'm gonna do all of it, right? But come to my surprise, when I do find this book online to buy, it's an anger management control. And I was livid. And in my mind, I'm having this conversation in my internal monologue where I'm like, where does this guy get off? Like, what? Seriously. I go in there to therapy one time and he thinks I need anger management control. Like, what on earth? I don't have an anger management problem. I've never had an anger problem before at all. I'm completely controlled. I know what I'm doing. I don't explode on people. You know, in my inner narrative is like, she screams angrily. Yeah. It's kind of the point where I was like, oh, wait. I see. I see that I'm angry. I'm acknowledging that there might be a little tinge of anger there, and maybe I should do something about it. So, number one, acknowledge it. Total side trail there. But anyway, number two, you have to accept it. It's okay to be angry. And like I said, there's a lot of things that influence that propensity to repress anger. But it's okay to be angry. And I don't think that I can say that enough or reaffirm that enough. It's okay. And you're not going to go out of control or your whole life be led by emotion or anything by accepting the fact that you're angry and that you can get angry and that you are angry about things and you might have to deal with it. It is okay. And it's better to accept it now and to do something about it than to just push it aside and repress it, because again, you're going to hit that whole build into resentment and explode in rage thing. And we want to avoid that. That is why. Now, for me personally, probably fellow INTJs, it's pretty hard to just accept things without understanding them. So like my side note here, Perpy, you have to understand it. And understanding usually starts with why. So why am I angry? Who or what triggered it? You know, is it something that is repressed that's coming back up again? Is it something that I've designated as being justified? Because I might be trying to rationalize with myself that I am not angry. I'm just kind of experiencing indignation. It's righteous anger, and I'm completely justified in being a little upset because this and this happened. That again of like kind of trying to justify it away, but it's still anger, and so we accept that we're angry and it's okay to be angry, and we don't have to justify it away or repress it. Like, it's okay. It's a natural emotion. It's something that we go through, and it can be healthy. It can be healthy to express and challenge anger. So that's what we want to do. So number 3 is that we want to express it. We want to express anger in a healthy way. And somehow we want some kind of external manifestation or expression of our anger, because that's what's going to allow us to let go of it and move on. We don't just say, okay, I'm angry, I'm going to stop being angry now. We have to do something about it. And there's 2 like typical ways that you're going to express it, either physically or verbally. And physically is a great way, especially for INTJs, to deal with anger, and to keep it in control, like long term, because, you know, at the top of the video I mentioned, you know, everyday irritation of just like, you have to deal with humans all the time and emotions, and it's irritating and annoying, and those things build into deeper anger. So if you maintain a physical outlet of exercise, sports, art, even periodical scheduled crying sessions, some way to express all of that so that you're not bottling it up, that can be very beneficial. Yeah, I mean, anything that is physical, you know, even having like really great sex all the time, something that is physically engaging your body so that you can release all of the stress and the tension from the anger that you feel. Me personally, I started mixed martial arts training, and I love it. I wish that, you know, that was something that my parents had gotten me into as a kid. I'm like, this like changes the game to have something, and then it's, you know, it's like a healthy way to punch people, but not really, I don't. Anyway, the other way is verbally. So you can unload your feelings onto family members and friends who you are close to, but I don't advise that at all, unless you learn to harness it. The best way to do that is to pay a therapist, because they are professionals and they can handle it, and they're third parties, so they're not going to be offended by anything, because chances are if you try to be honest and release everything that you're feeling, like putting words to it and everything, you're going to offend somebody who's connected to the situation or the people or whatever. Or you just might be just like so mad that everything you say comes off with so much aggression that they, you know, even if they're not involved in the situation, they might be, you know, taken aback by you and your overpowering emotions. So you can do it with people that you're close to, but like when it gets really deep and you're really angry, I would advise against it. And a therapist is a great like alternative. Again, they're third party, they're trained to handle that, and you can lay anything on them and they're like, you know, okay, they can take it. Because sometimes I just have to rant about stuff, you know. That's, you know, another side of the everyday irritation of INTJs is the ranting. And sometimes I do that. If I go to the store and something that I buy all the time is not there, and I just have to like go off, or they change the label on something or whatever, and you know, just like little things that kind of like irritate me, and then I just go on a rant about it, and then I feel better. Like I just need to get all of that out. It's just everything that I'm feeling right now. It is that unexpected like little interruption or surprise that I had everything planned out and something didn't go according to plan, and I just have to let everybody know how I'm upset about it not working out the way that I thought it was going to work out. And then once I say all my part, I'm done. It's not actual vocal, but writing can also be very beneficial here. Journaling, kind of like detailing, again, just trying to get all of it out. If you're musically inclined, writing music, most of the songs that I have written have been angry songs that I haven't recorded. They're just like, it's an expression. It's getting all of those feelings out of like some way that I need to express them and get them outside of my mind and into the real world. So all of these things are the, you know, different healthy ways that you can find to express your anger. And sometimes this is, you know, it's a way to help you process it. And the thing that, you know, people will tell you outside of that, they're like, okay, you need to feel your feelings, and then I repeat that, and I'm like a mantra. Okay, I need to feel my feelings. I really still am trying to figure out how one does that. I think through my feelings. I think through it. I need that process of like doing all of these things. So yes, I'm going to look at it, acknowledge that I'm angry. I'm going to accept it. And I can't accept it until I understand it. So I'm going to logically process like where it came from, why I'm doing it, you know, what can help me prevent this in the future, all of these things. And then I'm going to find a way to express it. Now, part of the expression is, if it's just something that made you angry, like, you know, I don't know, it's, you know, it's a process or something in your life that upset you, those unexpected interruptions and things like that, it's easier just to like lay it out there and move on. But when it's relational and it involves people, a lot of times you can't do that. So there's the, you know, the part B here to expressing it. Sometimes you have to challenge it. You have to challenge that anger and go beyond that, where you have a discussion. You have to have a confrontation with the other person that's involved in the situation. And that's can be a little trickier of getting into that place. But see, like I went back up to, sometimes I don't acknowledge I'm angry, and other people recognize the emotion in me before I do. And when they come to me and they say, hey, you're upset, do you want to talk about it? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not upset, right? I've evaded the potential ramification of the problem by not confronting it and challenging it in that moment of saying, yes, I am really upset. You did X, Y, and Z. It made me feel this way. You know, what can we do to change this and, you know, mend our relationship? And that's an important thing to learn relationally, is being able to have that conversation and being willing to confront it. And most of the time you're gonna have to go and engage that person, because even if they may have gotten a sense, or what, especially if they're feelers and they just pick up on these things, they may have gotten the sense that you were upset at the beginning before you even realized it and acknowledged it and accepted it and all of those things, but you blew them off. So you're going to have to go to them and, you know, initiate the challenge, the confrontation, that discussion. And then there might also be times where people would do stuff and like the surprise thing, right? Somebody does something really extravagant and great for you and you're upset. And for me, like, I'm just thinking of like the worst thing that could possibly happen, like surprise wise, would be if my husband like went and bought a house, like without my input or anything, and it was just like, ta-da, and here's the keys to your brand new home, and like added decorator or whatever, like all this stuff. Like I would like not even know what to do with myself. Like I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, right? Because I had no, you know, I had no input into it, and like this is a huge decision and all these things, like I would freak out, and other people would be like, this made me like, wow, like what a huge extravagant gift, all these things of like that different viewpoint, right? That I would just be so mad, but I have to explain that of like, okay, like I'm not offended that you want to buy me gifts, or like that's really sweet, or even if I really like the house, but the fact that I'm upset about the fact that you pulled it over on me, like you didn't allow me to be a part of a process that, you know, wanted to be involved in, and things like that, of, you know, you have to understand it. And so sometimes INTJs are usually going to need time to pull back, step back, go through these steps, acknowledge it, accept it, understand it. You know, you might have to express some things, you might have to work on, pre-plan the conversation, the confrontational conversation, and then go engage in it. But the great side to the INTJ, for anybody else out there of the other types and you're wanting to learn about INTJs and you're like, oh no, like this is a disaster. The good thing about getting into that challenging, like confrontational conversation with an INTJ to repair your relationship is that INTJs are fantastic at perspective. And we want to gain perspective from every angle. So we want to know your side of things. And we hate narrow-minded people. We don't like assumptions. We don't like laziness and ignorance and backing off. Okay, like I listed those earlier. We don't like that, and we don't return that to people in relationships. We want to understand your side of it, and we may not express that effectively when we talk to you, but we do want to understand your side of it. So if we can get into a neutral zone and have a conversation and then go, aha, all of these epiphanies go of like, oh, I understand, see, you did this and it made me mad, and then so I threw back the sarcastic, because inevitably most, you know, people are going to be upset with me because of the sarcasm that comes out of my mouth. But the sarcasm was linked to the anger because I felt wronged by something else, and you trail it all back. If you sit down and have a conversation about it, everybody can connect. We can all learn more about each other, and we grow in our relationship, and it builds intimacy. And this is like the top thing that people don't do enough of, and this is why we can't get along and like get close to each other, is having that confrontation with one another. So do it. Go out there and deal with your anger. Acknowledge it, accept it, understand it, challenge it if you need to, and express it in a healthy way. And not in a, we'll just repress it and we'll build on this resentment and then we'll explode in gunfire, a verbal vomit. But it's justified because it's true. It's usually all true. All of the things that come out of the INTJ's mouth when we're angry are true. Factual statements that we have compiled in our little spreadsheet of things that we keep track of on everybody so that we can utilize it later on in life. But you do not want to be on the receiving end of an angry INTJ, especially if we get to the point where we want to do it on purpose. Like most people, they can tell you, like, if they've been verbally abused by an INTJ, that it was incredibly destructive. But, you know, I would say that most of the time people feel that way and they're like, this is the worst thing ever, and it's most likely that the INTJ did it involuntarily because they just got pushed to the brink where they exploded. And if they did it on purpose, like, you have no idea how much worse it would be if we are intentionally trying to hurt you with words, and the ability that we have to manipulate everything that we've learned about you and everything going on and use it strategically to stab you and twist the knife in your heart. And my fellow INTJ. That's what we want to avoid. We don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. Part of the verbal vomit, truth bearing, like all, you know, unloading onto people that we're close to and intimate with, is the fact that it also creates this guilt. When we do it, like, because I said, most of the time if we do it, it's involuntary. It is because we've been repressing it, we haven't been dealing with it, and now it's boiling over. And then we just explode. We explode in rage on the closest target, who a lot of times is not going to be, you know, the initial reason for any of it, and they didn't deserve it. And we know that when we rationalize it. We're like, oh my gosh, like they didn't deserve that. I'm angry because of this, this, and this, and they just happen to be in the line of fire. And then you have to deal with guilt, and we don't want to deal with guilt. We want to repress that, turn that into something too. So, you know, then we get into this like apology mode. Well, I don't want to apologize for anything. I'm usually right. I like being right. I like everybody knowing that I'm right about everything, and I don't want to have to apologize, but then I'll be guilt ridden and have to do something and say something and, you know, try to fix it, because obviously they didn't deserve it. So to avoid that, avoiding apologies and avoiding guilt and more emotions that I don't want to deal with, you have to deal with the anger when it arises. And even if it has been something that you've repressed for a long time, you know, take some time to look at yourself, especially if you get super agitated at little everyday things, of tracing that back to where it stems from. Where did it originate from? Where are the roots of that? And sometimes, you know, our repressed emotions resurface in a different form. So we may be experiencing anger that, you know, originally was grief from a situation, you know, maybe like unrequited love, you know, was positive emotion and things didn't go the way that you planned, and now you repressed like all of this grief and hurt, and it resurfaces the anger. So just trying to trace everything back. And if you're like me, basically everything in my life, you know, everything that I've repressed in my life has turned into resentment, and I'm trying to deal with it now in my 30s, and I wish I learned how to do it earlier. So one of the things that I hope to gain by anything that I put on the internet is that saving somebody else from having to go through things that I went through and I didn't like. So that's my thoughts on INTJs dealing with anger. And again, just a summary. Acknowledge your anger, accept it, understand it, challenge it if you need to, and express it in a healthy way. And it's okay. It's okay to be angry. Like, it's a normal human emotion, and it can potentially help you grow as a person and help your relationships grow to a more intimate level if you confront it and deal with it in a healthy way. So, alright, that was kind of long, but thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.